We'll wait for Mr. Carluzzi to join. If he doesn't join exactly by 7, then we'll start the meeting. Is that all right? Thank you. Mr. Hanna,
Yes.
we are recording and we're live on YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can start, right?
Correct.
Good evening, everyone. This is the Zoning Board of Appeal, web-based meeting hosted on Zoom, April 28, 2022 at 7 p.m. We start with the roll call. Mr. Moore.
Present.
Mr. Rivas.
Present.
Mr. Sibbett.
Present.
And Mr. Delucia.
Present.
I would seat Mr. Delucia for Tony Rivero. And I'm Joe Hanna, chairman of the board. We'll move to accept the minute from April 14, 2022.
Mr. Hanna, Peter
Yeah.
and Michael and yourself can accept the minutes.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank
I make a motion to accept the minutes from April 14, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minute accepted. The next regular meeting is May 12, 2022. And a public hearing 2207, 102 Mill Plain Road, CRD LLC, Thomas Beecher, Esquire agent, C80 zone, increased size from 75 square feet to 211. Permit illuminated LED sign with changing content. Can I have a motion to hear the application?
Make a motion to hear 22-7 102 Mill Plain Road.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Beecher, can you tell us what your plan is?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, all. For the record, my name's Tom Beecher and I represent CRD LLC, which is Caroluzzi's Markets. They own and are constructing the Caroluzzi Market of Danbury and a liquor store on this subject property. Here with me this evening is Justin Miller, who's the project manager from Claris Construction on this project. The Caroluzzi family owns Caroluzzi Markets in Bethel, Georgetown, and Newtown. The Caroluzzi family has been in the local grocery store business since 1949, and they are good corporate citizens. This particular site on Mill Plain Road is a large 4.5 acre site. It's located in the CA80 commercial arterial zone. As you can see from the site plan that I filed, the store building is located toward the rear of the property, approximately 370 feet from Mill Plain Road. This results in limited visibility of any building signs due to that depth. The property itself is actually 625 feet deep on the western boundary. Many previous sign variances have been granted by this board where a property is large and the building or buildings are located well away from the road. And I'll touch a little bit more on that in a minute. If you look at the site plan, I've highlighted the location of the proposed sign. The sign will be located on
Mr.
northeast
Mr. Beecher,
side.
can I interrupt 1 second, please? Can we see the your plan on the screen?
I've just opened it.
Oh,
Okay, do you want me to bring it up? I do have it available here. Or do you have it available, Mr. Beecher?
I think I do.
But
Not sure how
I-
adept I am at it, but.
Well, here we are. How's that?
that's good.
So there's the plan. Did you have a specific question or do you just want to bring it up?
No, I just want to bring it up for everyone to see it.
Okay. So as I was saying, the main building is set far back from the road. And the sign itself is highlighted on this particular plan. It's on the northeast corner of the entrance and exit driveway to the site. There's only one access to the site. So this is the only freestanding sign we're going to have on this property. There won't be any other signs at any other access points because there aren't access points in any other location. This property has almost 300 feet in frontage, but this will be the only sign. Now, if you look at the proposed sign itself that we also submitted, we believe the overall sign itself, the design is tasteful and a classic design. Hopefully you'll agree with us. I would like to point out that the sign regulations require that the entire upper triangle of portion of the sign be calculated in the gross sign area measurement because that segment of the sign happens to be lit by recessed lighting. And that's just the way the definition of sign area is in the regulations. In other words, the requested 211 square feet maximum that we're looking for is not just all sign lettering. The first variance we requested is to allow the sign area to be enlarged to a maximum of 211 square feet. Due to the limited visibility of any wall signs, as I said, on the building from the road and the large acreage of the property, we're seeking this variance for the increased sign area. The height of this sign will comply with the 20-foot height limit in the zoning regulations. To me, this is an important fact. My client wanted to be sure that the sign complied with this height requirement. And as I said, at the top of the triangle, that's the portion of the sign, the top of the triangle, that's the portion of the sign that hits the 20-foot mark. The bulk of the sign is actually 16 to 17 feet and below. And while we're asking for an additional sign area, the entire sign, as I said, meets the height requirement. So it will not, for instance, look like the giant Starbucks sign over on exit 5. The board has granted similar sign variances for visibility hardship reasons in the recent past. And by that, again, I mean road signs on large properties with buildings or large buildings set back from the road. In 2018, I presented the variance application for ShopRite Supermarket in the North Street Shopping Center. This board granted variances to allow that sign to be up to 228 square feet and to be digital with a changing message. We've also submitted other examples of large freestanding signs on large properties for visibility to you in our packet. For instance, the shops at Marcus Dairy, that's a total of 220 square feet. This board has granted variances for sign for Primark and Sears over at the mall, Doctor's Express on Mill Plain, and over at number 8082 Mill Plain for the warehouse business that's tucked in the back of that particular property. Trader Joe's Plaza, that sign is 182 square feet. And then there's the Dick's Sporting Goods sign on the front of the mall, which is a very large sign. But again, for good reason. That particular building is set back from the road, and it's a large building on a large site. So this board has recognized that variances are legitimate for large properties located in a commercial zone. The second variance request is to allow the LED sign message to change at intervals no less than every 10 seconds. I do want to highlight one important point about this. An LED sign itself is allowed by the regulations. It's just the changing message that causes us to be here seeking a variance for this. Now, every morning on my way to work at 148 Deer Hill Avenue, I sit at the traffic light on New Street, waiting to cross West Street onto Deer Hill Avenue. I have to admit, I never paid much attention to the LED changing message sign at City Hall on the corner facing me. But after Mark called me about this application, I paid attention. In fact, for over 2 months, I've counted the seconds between sign messages as I sit there. And those particular messages change every 4 to 10 seconds. Nothing stays up longer than 10 seconds on that particular sign. And most are 4 to 6 seconds long before they change. Obviously, I haven't been distracted, and I haven't noticed any other drivers at the light being distracted or mesmerized to the point where they fail to go forward on a green light. So we're just asking for a minimal interval time that's the same as the longest interval on the city's very own sign. In addition to City Hall, there are other digital changing message signs in Danbury. Our proposed digital sign is 8 by 14 or 112 square feet. The Stu Leonard's digital sign is 132 square feet, and that's just a screen. Stu's actually has 2 digital changing message signs along their frontage. The digital or LED portion of the ShopRite sign is 100 square feet. And you can see these in our exhibit that we submitted to you. There's also a changing content digital sign at Danbury High School, which was approved by you the same year you approved the ShopRite sign. And there's also a changing digital sign over at the west side, WestCon campus entrance, Mill Plain Road, nearby this particular site. Why do we want this type of sign? Again, visibility and of course, advertising. But as you can see, this sign is nicely framed and landscaped, and it is horizontal. So it does not look like a giant scoreboard. As I said, the zoning regulations permit an illuminated LED sign, but the regulations say no flashing illumination or animated illumination or rotating illumination is permitted. The zoning regulations also prohibit signs which have beacons, strobes, rotating beacons, and things like that. This Caroluzzi sign will not have anything like that. No animation, no movement, no twirling, no rotation, no pulsating portions to it. It's not a pulsating sign. It's not a rotating sign. There will not be any on-screen movement or animation. It just changes screens. It just changes messages no less than every 10 seconds. We're seeking the variance to the extent that a message that does change every 10 seconds constitutes a flashing sign. But think about it, 10 seconds is a pretty long time. The zoning regulations do not define flashing or flash. The definition of flash, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is to send out a sudden, brief blaze or light, or to send out light in sudden, brief spurts. And I gave you a copy of that definition in the package. I also looked at other dictionary definitions. The Oxford Dictionary Says a flash is a shining in a bright, brief, or sudden intermittent way. The Cambridge Dictionary defines it as to shine brightly and suddenly. The Free Dictionary says it's a quick showing of bright light. To me, flashing is more like a strobe light or when you flash your high beams while driving. A 10-second interval is not sudden and it's not a brief spurt. It's simply not a flash. So one hardship is in the regulations and the lack of a definition of flashing. It's simply not that clear. We're just asking for a variance that is consistent with the other variances that have been granted. Now, the primary reason for a prohibition on certain types of signs in the zoning regulations is for health and safety reasons, to avoid driver distraction. In this case, this proposed sign with the minimum interval for content change will not pose any risk to health and safety. It will not distract. If you've seen the sign at City Hall, then you know exactly what the LED portion of our sign will look like. Only the Caroluzzi sign will actually change less often. This sign, again, will comply with the height limit of 20 feet. The sign will not be in the way. It's not in any sight line as it complies with the regulations in these respects. So 102 Mill Plain Road is located in the CAAD zone. It's on a high traffic arterial roadway in the city. Again, this is a large commercial property and this proposed sign will not have any impacts or be detrimental in any way to the neighborhood. There are numerous large signs on Mill Plain Road. Again, I would suggest that an appropriate condition of approval as set forth in my letter, in addition to your normal per plan submitted, would be to add the language, other than message changes at intervals of not less than every 10 seconds, the sign shall not otherwise flash, rotate, pulsate, move, or be animated. So that's my presentation. I thank you for your time, and I obviously would ask you to grant the variances.
I have some questions for you.
Okay.
While we're going from 100, the square footage for a sign is more than double what you allowed for that property. And you have a triangle, you're saying on top of the sign, is that included in the square footage? Is there any way you can trim it down? And the second thing I have is, which we don't like the fast changing signs. You mentioned the ShopRite, and I think the city is gonna reinforce the time it changed little more, because for a public safety, and we don't want a sign going every 10 seconds. Is there a way you can push it up like 30 seconds, 40 seconds?
Well, let me address the questions. Your first question was about size. The size we propose is not as big as some, as I explained. Your question related to that was, can we trim it down? I suppose we could look at that. The ShopRite sign is actually larger. The Stu sign is larger. In terms of the interval, I guess our position was that this is the longest interval of what the city sign does. So we weren't asking for anything different than the city does. You said, can we have a little bit longer interval? I guess we could.
Well, I think the time is too fast now. Everybody want to put these flashing signs everywhere, or a changing sign, whatever you want to call them. Every 10 seconds, it's too much. And then I have one more issue with this. It's gonna be, I know the Caroluzzi have wine and beer or whatever. Is that gonna be displayed on the sign too?
What, the advertising for it, you mean?
Right.
I presume so, yes.
So, in that area there, we don't like to see the liquor display advertising on that change in sign, because is there a way you can keep the liquor out? You can put,
Good. Yes, we could.
okay, so let's go back to the question of the timing. Is there, I like to see some little bit more time delay between messages. Can you work on that?
Yes, I think we can look at everything that you've said, Mr. Chairman. I guess what I would suggest is maybe we'll hear from others as well as other members of,
Okay,
in addition to the board. And then I get to go last, and I can certainly,
I'm open the floor for a board member to have their question, their opinion too. So,
I have some questions concerned. Perhaps I should maybe ask a more basic question before we get too deep into the weeds of the discussion of what's flashing and what isn't. And although I do want to piggyback on something about the city sign after I ask this question, which is this. I looked real hard for a hardship. And yes, you stated in the letter that you can't see the building signs from the road. Well, I don't think that's a hardship. I don't think that defines a hardship whatsoever. The sign identifies the property and what it is. As you drive in, you can see whatever signs, pharmacy, bakery, and all the sort of things that supermarkets put on the outside. So I would ask you to more clearly identify and state what the hardship here is.
well, I still think it's what I said, which is that the building is, many variances are granted because of the configuration and size of a property. So here you have a large property with a building that's configured towards the rear of the property. And again, I'm not reinventing the wheel here or being overly creative. This is a similar hardship that was the basis for granting the variances for the numerous other signs that I recited. So, I think that.
Well, many of those signs contain strip centers, which have multiple stores. This is one store basically, and two if you want to count the wine store. I don't see that as apples to apples in most cases.
Well, the ShopRite sign individually, yes, it's on the North Street Shopping Center sign with other signs. But in and of itself, it exceeds the size requirements, and obviously it also had the changing message content. Stu Leonard's is another example. It's a large sign, and there's plenty of, it has the same attributes as you mentioned for Caroluzzi.
Stu Leonard's was just a little bit before my time, and I've yet to hear an explanation of what the hardship for that was. But that's a long story that we won't get into tonight. And as far as the city sign goes, we had some concerns the night the city came before us for that sign and the changing messages. And one of the ones is, what would the interval of the timing be? And how would that be enforced? Same would apply here. And I know we stated that night that we were looking for something much greater than what the interval is. And when I first sat at that light several years ago after the sign was installed, I did the same exercise you did. And I called to our fair city and I said, what's up? You haven't really followed the spirit of the law, if you want to, if you're so you want to look at it that way. And it did change a bit for a while, but personnel changes and things change. The point is, you can't enforce it. And it will change even if we establish a time tonight, which makes me very cautious about any changing signs. But back to my original question, I don't want to go further. There's much more, of course, we can talk about the details of the sign itself and the pros and cons. I'm not seeing a hardship that rises to the need for a variance. In fact, if there is a hardship, by not being able to read the signs that are on the building, that would go towards an economic hardship, which is not a valid hardship for a variance.
Okay, we'll take it under consideration.
I watch the progress of the building as I drive down Mill Plain Road. I think Carluzzi's Market is a welcome addition to Danbury. And as we all know, I've always been, pro-business. I'm a commercial real estate landlord. I would be a hypocrite if I didn't want to be always in that corner, helping increase the tax base and certainly having welcome, commerce in Danbury. Now, we know there's going to be a sign and there's going to be, whatever type of signage, that we get. It's just a matter of we're going to have to figure out what we're going to need to do to make that happen. I believe you work on the ShopRite sign, Attorney Beecher.
Yes,
You remember offhand what the interval was?
it was, I think it was 2.5 minutes,
Okay.
which I think is the extreme, but we were sort of breaking the ice at the time. And
Yeah.
then the city signs were all approved in the interval.
Okay.
So I think
Okay.
Mr. Hannah's on the right track a little bit. Certainly, I don't think 2.5. I think that's too long.
Yeah, no, 2.5. I mean, exactly right. And no matter what we make it, it's going to be hard to enforce. It seems like that. I looked around at a lot of signs too, and I don't think I found any that are 2.5 minutes intervals, including the ones we've passed. So hopefully we can make something happen tonight that's going to be in the best interest of all, and it's not, health, safety, and welfare of the general public. Obviously, is the thing that comes to to form the forefront of everything with us. I guess we're going to have to figure out what that is.
I don't want to, well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, the other thing, again, now here we are getting into the weeds, which we're destined and bound to do, is, okay, so the definition of flashing or quick change, whether it's 10 seconds or whether it's 2.5 minutes, what's the transition between one message to the next? You could have an advertisement for eggplant, dark purple, and you could switch to an advertisement for orange juice. And in that transition between one to the other, even though they could have each been there for an hour, is there a slow fade? Because there is a quick change. And if it's a sharp, abrupt transition from one sign to the next, which sort of smacks of animation to me.
I don't think just the change in content really is the animation. I understand what you're saying.
But yes,
Well,
but
again,
the intensity of the light, I guess, could change quickly. Let's put it that way.
well, even the sign at City Hall, if you sit there, certainly recently, it transitions from some red, white, and blue content right over to the Ukraine flag, which is yellow and light blue. And
It's much smaller too. It's much smaller as well.
I don't think the screen is much smaller. The overall sign, I grant you, the bulk of the sign is, but the screen is not that much smaller than what we're proposing.
The Stop and Shop sign blinks about every 10 seconds, not 2.5 minutes, because I've sat in McDonald's parking lot and watched it, and it's far less than 2.5 minutes.
I have a few questions, if I may. I do have some concerns and reservations, as Mr. Chairman Hanna and Board Member Moore had stated, but I do have some questions in regards to is there any proposal on Carluzzi's end as a shut-off time to this thing if this board was to be approved, as far as hours of operation, to that, at certain hours of the night, the board would be shut off. And then my other question is on the Sign Pro pamphlet that you had given us. I see that there is a max continuous power of 11,860 watts. And this is why I asked the question about the shutoff time is, what is the lumens being given off of these LED lights of a LED board of this size? My concern would be, I guess where I'm getting to is, if someone's driving at night, I know being in the military, and I know Pete DeLucia has been in the military, there's something where, at night where we have acquire that night vision, and if light is hit, if you get lights to the eyes, there's what we've learned, at least in the military, is there's a 15-minute duration where you're trying to reacquire that night vision. And my concern would be with individuals driving down Mill Plain Road, the sign, the size of the sign, and then the lumens being given off. And I know, and I'm not saying that 11,860 watts is what's going to be, have to be operating the sign at all times. That's just the max continuous power. I would like to have a translation to what the operating watts would be to the sign. I was looking at the state law as far as the density of illumination to the to headlights, what the state law is, and what I read here on the state website is that let me see right here, Connecticut, there may be no more than 4 lamps exceeding 300 candle power illuminated at front at any one time. That's Connecticut State Law Title 14, Section 14-96. And I didn't get time to do all the math and try to figure out the equations from 300 candle power illuminated to lumens, but I would like to possibly have that answer if you guys could before possibly proceeding here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put Justin on the spot because he may not have the answer, but these signs are designed by companies that put them up on commercial property. So I'm reasonably certain that they're made with that idea in mind. In other words, that it's not going to be a danger to the public on the highway that drives by them. And certainly they wouldn't be any more powerful than what's existing at ShopRite and Stu Leonard's. But we can certainly get you some further information on that in a couple of weeks.
I would appreciate it. And again, like Mr. Board Member Moore and Chairman Hannon have stated, I am a little concerned about the liquor advertisement. Maybe there can be a change. Either, I don't know if the plan was to put images up on the board of any liquor sales, or is it just lettering with prices? But that is a little concerning.
I'll discuss that with Mr. Caraluzzi as well. Certainly, if it's limited to grocery store items or pharmacy items,
and
that may be fine.
And then I also again, like Mr. Moore had stated, I am trying to understand the hardship here on this application, but
I have one more question, Mr. Beecher. You have a 211 square feet sign. I'm sure one portion of the sign is gonna be the message that change all the time, correct?
The actual LED portion of it?
Yeah, where you put the message that change all the time.
That portion of the sign, Mr. Hanna, is 112 square feet. So it's roughly 100 square feet less than the overall sign. Again, because the overall sign has to include the top part that says Caraluzzi's, which is not digital. And then it also includes the top triangle, which just has the street address but that's lit, so the entire triangle has to be included in our sign square footage.
So in this drawing here, that gray area in the center there, that's the illuminated part of it,
Right, and that's 112 square feet.
112. And so I'm sure the dimensions are somewhere here. I don't know if you have them right offhand. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think they're on the other chart. But again, Stu Leonard's digital portion of their sign's 132 square feet, to give you an idea. And I think ShopRite was 100. So we're ballpark close to that, and we're way lower than Stu's.
Okay, anyone else have a question from the board? Look like everybody happy now.
I don't know
Okay.
about that.
Everybody, anybody in support this application?
I support with modification.
No, we
Time
ask
interval.
for anybody in support of the public. So unless you have a question, Mr. Delusha. Anybody in support this application? Anybody in opposition?
Yes, I'm in opposition.
Okay, tell us who you are and go ahead. Tell us
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for allowing me to address the board tonight. My name is Jason Bresnick, and I live on Maplewood Drive in the Onthack neighborhood, which is located up the hill across the street from this location. Given their reputation, I was excited to hear the news that Caroluzzi's was joining our neighborhood and bringing another quality grocery option to our area. And I use the word neighborhood with purpose, as the stores and businesses on Mill Plain Road are more visible to me on a daily basis than most of the houses on my own street. I drive past this location on my way to drop off and pick up my children from school. I drive past it on my way to work in the morning and home at night. And I drive past this location on my way to shop at any of the stores that Caroluzzi's is hoping to compete against for my business. But like all good neighbors who I interact with on such a regular occasion, I ask them to be respectful to the neighborhood and consider their impact on others. It's my opinion that this request by Caroluzzi's to erect a large, bright, content-changing LED sign to our neighborhood does not show this respect. Mill Plain Road is not the Danbury Fair Mall area. It's not the Federal Road area. This is a commercial strip among residential areas and is not appropriate for the signage that they have requested multiple variances to erect. First, I want to share why I think the sign doesn't fit the area. The brightness of LED signs extends beyond the range of standard signage, neon, or spotlights. I assume most or all of you by now are familiar with the Stu Leonard sign on Federal Road, and if not, certainly drive by it after dark and note the striking difference from those around it. As Member Rivas said, will this sign be lit and active 24 hours a day, or are there some limitations? And how will those limitations be enforced? Because as mentioned regarding the city variances that were granted, how long will that enforcement even last? The thought of having a 200-foot bright glowing billboard sign flashing deals on shrimp and beer in my face when I'm driving my kids home from a late evening practice, or when I'm leaving the area at 4 a.m. to catch a morning business flight is unappealing at best. There's something about the night having a semblance of quiet darkness that I moved out of New York City to have in my life. And I believe this is one reason why such zoning regulations are in place for this area and why they should be maintained if at all reasonable. Second, I wanted to fairly consider if the hardship the applicant and Caroluzzi's has expressed are valid. To understand this, I looked at their existing 3 locations, and if I can share my screen, I would like to just show a couple images.
Go ahead.
Let me know if you can see that.
Yep.
In Newtown, a respectable, static, traditional name sign calls out the store name. This is despite the store being set much further back from the street than the proposed Danbury location. You'll also note that the secondary entrance that Mr. Beecher referenced he doesn't have in Danbury also does not have a sign in Newtown. In Bethel, the traditional name sign is a bit higher and larger, but nowhere near what's being proposed in either sign, either in either size or lighting. You'll also notice that a large storefront area is left without any signage at all. In Georgetown, the traditional static name sign, which is about the same as the others, is used again. If the signage at these three other locations have allowed the chain to be successful enough to expand to a fourth location, why do they need a massive digital billboard to be successful in Danbury? And as my image shows that I took from across the street in my car, the Danbury location has plenty of unobstructed frontage to Mill Plain Road. Lastly, none of the competitors in the area have anything even beginning to approach the size and visual disruption of this proposed sign. As stated before, the signs that have been granted variances and are bigger are within the Mill Plain Road area, have multiple businesses that have to be represented across it. These variances are not needed to help potential customers identify the business. That could be done within the regulations. These variances are a garish opportunity for in-your-face promotion and advertising. And as such, I refute the hardship claim. Third, the application claims in their request for multiple variances that the zoning laws for signage are in place for, and I quote, health and safety to avoid driver distraction, unquote. Then they claim this proposed sign, and I quote again, will not pose any risk to health and safety, unquote. Yet as I look at their lot plan and the proposed sign location and traffic layout, I would claim the opposite to be true. This sign as proposed would present a very real threat to safety of drivers. Mill Plain Road is a road that, depending on time of day, can have very congested, but also very fast moving traffic. Making left turns out of business entrances without traffic lights require clear visibility and avoidance of distraction to both the vehicle making the left turn and the vehicles on the road who may need to adjust their vehicle pace to allow cars to turn into the flow of traffic safely. This sign and location may greatly inhibit line of sight to all vehicles, and the larger and more distracting the sign is, the greater chance for vehicle or pedestrian collision. To conclude my statement, I do welcome Caroluzzi's as a new business that I would like to patron, and as a new member of our neighborhood, and I wish them all the success in the world. We need strong commercial enterprises in the area to maintain the desirability and property value of our homes. What we do not need is for Mill Plain Road to become lit like Times Square's, the Vegas Strip, or even Federal Road. Nor do we need the additional danger and visibility complication for drivers that these variances would bring. I ask the applicant to withdraw the request for the two variances, and if they don't, I request this board to deny them both. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you for your opinion. Anybody else for it?
Yes, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I did receive an email to be read into the record, if that is okay with you.
Okay.
Okay. The email starts, I read on page 4 of the Friday, April 15th News Times about the request by Caroluzzi's to install a non-compliant sign for their new store. Here is my opinion. I don't care too much how big the sign is, but please, capitalized, do not allow them to have a sign that constantly changes messages. I find such signs to be very distracting and therefore dangerous to drive by. I also find it annoying to have a sign change while I'm in the middle of trying to read it. Thank you very much for your consideration. I'm very glad we have a regulation against signs that flash, rotate, pulsate, move, or are animated. I hope that you will uphold the rule against distractions and reject this aspect of the proposed variance. And it is signed by Keith Henderson, 19 Grove Place in Danbury. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else in opposition? Okay, Mr. Beecher, you want to have?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
Paul Rotello, 13 Linden Place, Danbury. I have been a longtime patron of Caroluzzi's. Bethel, Georgetown, have been in the one in Newtown, and I'm very much looking forward to their grand opening here in Danbury on the west side in the 6th Ward that I represent. I have some issues about the sign, and that's why I'm here tonight. I'll keep this brief. I'm not completely on board with Attorney Beecher's opinion about the hardship. I think that the location of the store was dictated more by the engineers at Carolucci than by the city. To me, a hardship would have been had they purchased the property and a zoning regulation allowed something that they considered prior to the purchase, and then they purchased it, and then subsequently, before submitting plans, the planning commission, the zone was changed. Now they find out that they can't do what they intended to do when they purchased, and now that's a genuine hardship, which is fostered upon them by the city. This is not that case. I think their hardship is a hardship of their own design, their own making. Be that as it may, I happen to be in accord with Commissioner Moore, who thinks that the hardship is more economic than anything else. I think that's been established. I think you should discount the hardship. So that just brings us back to the sign itself. Apparently, an illuminated sign of a smaller size is already legal. I would have one more contention with Attorney Beecher about the definition of flashing. And I do agree that that may be something that the city should look at when it comes to these regulations. But I mean, you know, a flash can be a lot of things. A lightning bolt is one. You can see a lightning bolt one time in the summer. It's a flash. Somebody takes your picture with a camera. It's a flash. It doesn't have to do it every second, 30 times a second. One change can be a flash. So a sign, as you saw earlier, when staff read the letter, you know, you're sitting at a light, you're reading a sign, and it changes. That's a flash. It's distracting. I can't. The Stu Leonard sign is counterproductive for me. I can't look at it because if I'm driving and I start looking at it, I know it's going to change and it's going to distract me. So I just avoid looking at it in the first place. I don't think that it's appropriate on Mill Plain, and I also think that the judging non-commercial civic announcements in the same basket as commercial ones is probably not fair. There is a different discourse when it comes to civic communication. I'm not thrilled about the sign on City Hall. I'm a city official. I'm not an administrator. I did not approve that sign that came out of the mayor's office. I'm not sure that I would have, had I been mayor. I'm not sure I would have put that sign there. Be that as it may, when a high school has a large banner because they're putting a play on or something like that, it's fundamentally different from a commercial enterprise. And finally, as we all know, variances go with the property. And while I am sure that the Carolucci business as an institution will outlive many businesses in Danbury, there may come a time when they are no longer there, and we need to be prepared for what would go in its place. And anything else going into its place, whether it's a bail bondsman or a adult entertainment or a cannabis dispensary or a pawn shop, will be using that sign for their own purposes. So that's something that we need to consider as well. So I would ask you to deny the application, welcome Carolucci's with a regular sign, illuminated or not, non-flashing, of a regular size, and go from there. And I'm sure and I trust they will be as eminently successful here in Danbury, perhaps even more so than they find themselves in their other communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your opinion. Anyone else in opposition?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Benjamin's iPhone, he has his hand up, so I don't know if he's opposed or what.
Do I have the floor?
I see Benjamin on my phone. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Councilman Ben Chinese. I am also a member of the council member for the 6th Ward, along with Paul Rotello, and I'm here to also speak against the sign being putting up. As one of the reasons why I am against this sign is that I don't feel that it's the reasons given that it represents a hardship, because of the setback of the building does not necessarily should create a hardship. Because if you allow that as a hardship, you really kind of be opening the door for other places that could also use that same reasoning for them. For you can't see J.C. Penney's from Backers Avenue, so did that give them a right to put a sign, an electronic sign on the mall property? So what I'm
You,
lack of video because I'm at another meeting. The sign request here, as you know, it's an area that needs to be addressed from a city's perspective, not by property perspective. I agree with Councilman Rotello with that the city sign that went on City Hall was granted by a variance. The Stu Leonard sign that went up was granted by a variance. The Westcon sign, of course, it's state property and they don't go by our zoning laws. But other than that, the sign that they're proposing for the location doesn't fit the character of the other places that are there. I think this is the current zoning for that area is adequate for this as well. So if the applicant wishes to establish electronic signs, I really think they need to go in front of the zoning commission and have to set up regulations regarding flashes, times, and all that, because the ZBA really can't, there's no regulations of enforcement once it's approved. So the only enforcement you have is that it can't get bigger than what's been approved for the variance, but there's no regulations of enforcement as flash times and on and off and brightness and non-brightness, and whether they could advertise liquor on their signs. Because as you know, there's going to be a liquor store there as well. Can they advertise liquor on this sign? Again, the question is, why is the setback of the building allowable to create a hardship just because the building's set back further than most other buildings on that block? Again, to my opinion, I don't think this is a hardship that would worthy for approval in this matter. And I hopefully that you will refer this not to the zoning commission for their advice on this. So again, I thank you for your time this evening.
thank you for your opinion. Mr. Beecher, you want to respond to all?
If we're sure no one else is speaking against.
I don't think so. Anyone else in opposition? Anyone else in opposition? Look like the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the prudent thing to do is to continue this to your next regular meeting. And I'll discuss some of the matters that were raised tonight with my client. And we'll come back and address them. And maybe with a slightly altered plan, which we can do as long as it's smaller than what we requested.
Okay,
So that would be my request, Mr. Chairman.
that's a very good suggestion anyway. Anyone, we have to make a motion for continuation, Sean, or no?
Per the request of the client, I make a motion to continue this to the next scheduled ZBA meeting, which I think is the 12th of May.
That's correct.
Or whatever Mr. Beecher would need for his client, the next one or the one after that, whatever you need. I guess that's a very vague motion, but there it is.
The 12th is fine. I can always send in a request if that's a problem.
Okay.
So the next meeting is good for you, Mr. Beecher?
As far as I know, yes. Let's go with that.
All right, anyone anyone want to make a motion to continue it, or we don't need a motion?
Michael, did you just, Michael, you just seconded it?
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So move. Okay, so we'll see you the next meeting, Mr. Beecher.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
I
you.
hope you have a good plan, make everybody happy. It's gonna be hard work. Okay, all business is none, no business none, correspondence none. We move to adjournment now.
Hold on for just a minute, please.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're all set for the next meeting.
Thank you,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Guys, I want to just say thank you. Again, sorry for last meeting. My father had to go to the hospital and spend a few days. He wasn't feeling too well.
You
So I
okay?
apologize again for the inconvenience, and I thank you guys for being so.
Zio doing better?
I hope.
He's doing better. He's doing better.
Good.
Yeah.
Good man,
All
Good
good.
luck.
Don't worry.
Good luck together.